Good morning. Thank you for coming to our third weekend event. Today, we have a great presentation. My name is Teresa Orton. I'm the director of this museum that's owned by the Daughters of Utah Pioneers. And so we'd like to invite you after the presentation to come and go through the museum and see what we have. It's all free, so no worries there. But today we have Denise Winter, and she is... she's fabulous, and she's so talented, and she does so many things. We first associated with her when she came for a visit and introduced herself as a historic costumer and started to talk to us about some of the dresses that we had here and some of the other things. And so we had her come back and give us an assessment of our textiles, our garments, and different things that we have here. And what a treasure and what a find. She gave us so much information and has brought to life many of our artifacts and given us a lot more history for it. Denise is visiting from Arizona. Is where she lives now. So we appreciate the fact that she's made the effort to come today to talk to us. And without any further ado, Denise Winter.
Thank you. I'm here today to talk about that old dress and what she stood for, what she stands for, why we keep it, why it's important, what her life was like. It dates to the 1830s. And which is prior to any activity in this area, any settlements. It wouldn't have been. It would be prior, actually, to the Mormon Church beginning. So for this to land here and just be this exquisite piece of workmanship that has survived all of these years, she's going to be probably 200 in just another decade. Which is amazing because dresses like this don't survive. So what I'm going to talk about is what is the dress made of? How is it made? What is the construction technique? How do we know that's 1830s? And what was her life like? And what did she wear underneath that dress? Because this is a time when women wore corsets and petticoats, and it was that was all of great importance. And what were they like? And also, where did this come from? Where by the end, we'll talk about actually what are the possibilities of where she could have come from, and why is she here? Because it has no provenance on the dress. We have no record, and it's been here forever, right? Yes. For as long as there's records, it's been here. So when we look at the dress, it is a gingham. And gingham was made it was a very cheap cloth. And it was originally designed in Malaysia, and then it came over to the United States as a work clothes. It normally just work clothes. So it was used for aprons and, aprons and work shirts, things like that. It's also a woven pattern that is easy to make. So that made it less expensive to purchase. And then cotton was booming in the United States during this time. We're looking at cotton gin and making the manufacture of cotton more readily available. So one of the key aspects of this dress here is that the fabric is only 20 inches wide, which is the key aspect of dating this entire dress, is because that's the width of looms during this time period. As you moved along in time, the looms got bigger, the fabric got wider, and now we're looking at very large widths of fabric in our day and age. the dress looks green, doesn't it? It's actually, if you look very closely at the top of the, in here, you can see that it actually was once blue. And it's in on the hem and on the inseam, it was blue. Now, I think, my guess, and I am not a textile expert, but my guess is that this was indigo blue dress. And somehow it turned green by whatever it was contaminated with, whatever it was in sunlight. I don't know. I've had people tell me that indigo blue will turn green over time, but I haven't found evidence in that in research, scientific evidence. As a matter of fact, indigo has been around for 6,000 years. It's the oldest dye, and they found some in the, I don't know, that was thousands of years ago, and it was still blue. So why this turned green is a big mystery. I really can't answer that. But I really believe that this is indigo blue. And indigo is made from that plant, and it's derived from the leaves, and then it's turned into the rock form. So it creates a very deep color. But if you notice now, this is the indigo mixture. When they create the dye, it has this green tint to it. And you can see that that's the green tint here. So, and that's all I can really tell you about the dye mixture, but why it turned, I don't know. But you can see the faint bluing around here. And inside, we don't want to touch this dress. We don't want to handle it as much as handle it as least as possible. So those are two determinations. The looms this is a hand loom and kind of shows you about what they were like. And it was the people in their homes would make their own fabric, or they would make fabric for a community. And then when it became went into production, cotton went into major production, that changed the whole game. So this is now, this is a map that shows what clothing production was like in 1860, and remember this is 25 years prior, so that's not going to be as large of an area. But all of this is concentrated down here to the East Coast. You see there's nothing here, and this is 1860s, actually before the Civil War. So the cotton was all produced down in the South, obviously, and then the manufacturers were up north. And that remained true, actually remains true even to this day, I believe. So this dress, that you can see the inside of it, is put together with hooks and eyes. Every single bit of this, remember, it's all hand sewn. There's no machines now in this time frame. So women sat by the firelight or the candlelight and made little tiny stitches to create this dress. Someone just spent all of the time, just hours, creating this little dress to work in. And you can see it has an inner lining that locks with locks, and it has what we call pin tucks in the back that are, can I turn this in? I wanted to show the gathers in the back. Those little tiny pin tucks. And it's called gauging to work all of this fabric into the waistband, which is high at this time and place. So we look at cut lines and construction lines in this poor little tattered dress. And the hooks were invented in 1820, but they were flat hooks and eyes. So you see they're like rusty little flat pieces of wire that have been turned into hooks and eyes. By hand, of course. Everything is by hand here now. And the front opens. So you want to look at how that front opens. Women's clothing was cut this way, open in the front so they could nurse. So it would make it easy to nurse. And everything, all the underclothing was designed for both, for nursing, maternity. And you can see she could wear that for a long time through maternity. Although women were not to be seen after a certain time, about 6 months, you'd have to hide from public view. But, she could not, this dress could have been worn on a farm, and she never saw a city. Because we have absolutely no idea where it came from. She could have just never left the farm, because we just have no idea. But we know that she worked. We know that the dress has tons of repairs in it, meticulous little repairs. Inside, there is a pocket. There's a slat right here where she would, and I think it's right in here, where she would put the things that she needed for daily work, daily operation. Prior to this, just in the period prior to this, women had a slot in their clothing, but they wore pockets on the inside that were very decorative. So they could it was like a purse that was concealed, and they could just change clothes and change their purse or their pocket, and then just reach in there. And I believe that this pocket has been added on at a later date. But you can see how tattered the inside is from wear. Just extraordinary piece. Few of these garments ever survive. I have been to many, many museums to look at collections, different collections of clothing. And they all have beautiful clothes. They have these great, beautiful mutton sleeves and very elaborate garments, but you don't see these. It just doesn't, they just don't exist because they didn't survive. Some relative decided that this was important, she was important enough to save this dress for all those years and bring it into a museum. But who? And why? Why would somebody do that? Do anybody in this room have a dress that belonged to their grandmother or their great-grandmother? Probably not. But someone somewhere had, from 1830s to, say, the 1960s or something, this dress was probably passed around, from generation to generation. But who was she? She had to be important to whoever saved the dress. She had to have been an important figure, or an important figure related to an important man. That's another aspect. It could have been, Brigham Young, his mother, or you don't know. We have absolutely no idea. But think about what you would save and why you would save a dress like this and why it was so important. Tiny little stitches, and you can see the back has been ripped up there at the top, and then there's tiny piping at the waistband. There's piping at the sleeves, which is actually not just an aesthetic look, it also reinforces the sleeve. Now, the other possibility is that this dress could have been reworked. It could have been from an earlier date. It could have been from the 1820s and carried forward and reworked. Because those sleeves look, as we're going to see in a couple of slides, the sleeves are period correct in the three parts with the cuff, the length, and the shoulder. But that could have been reworked because fabric was at a premium. Your poor people couldn't afford anything, let alone fabric. So it was all reused. And for this to not have been turned into an apron is extraordinary. And so it's many stains. You can see that the patching with a different kind of calico fabric on the inside there. And the detail is just extraordinary. But here she stands representing the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers. And how cool is that? So see, this is an example of an 1835 dress that I got from a book. That's another way to date, is to try to find other garments and pictures of other garments that have survived. Some of the auction sites have pictures of garments that are in the same time frame, but it's still a best guess situation. This one here is the fabric width is only 20 inches, and that's what, when I consulted the experts, that's what they said. So there's many yards of fabric in that skirt, and you see it's also a little shorter in the front than it is in the back. That added to her ability to move and do her chores. Yes. Yeah, you missed the first couple of slides. I was talking about the looms being only 20 inches wide in the 1830s. So this shows another example of with all of the gathering and the pleating in the back, and then a corset and petticoat that she might have worn. And more of the three-piece sleeve you can see that's exactly the same is this dress. And the sloping shoulders, it would be down off the shoulders at this time frame, with the back is cut into 4 pieces, just because that was the cut and construction of the period. Cut here and cut here. So this back is one piece, and then it rolls all the way over here. Actually, this back of this dress is more blue. I'm just seeing in the light than the green. Right here you can see the contrast really well. So you have to look at that when we're done and look closely. It's another good example from Augusta Auctions of 1820s. So you can see that's simple as well. So clothing at this time period, you're not going to find any lace. You're not going to find, and in most clothing, you're not going to find lace. You're not going to find elaborate ruffles like came up later in the period. And I have these timelines that show you how fashion changed all the way up through 1903 that you're welcome to look at later. So there was no sewing machines. There was no industry. There was no automatic industry that could create these things and create the fabric and the materials that they could be sold to the general public. So right now we are looking at a time frame when all dress is simple. That's 1820. There's some ruffling or ruching on the trim on the bottom, and that's about it. And it's all hand stitched. So now bonnets. She would have to wear a bonnet. And this is the type of bonnet that they would have worn during the time frame. Probably most likely the cloth bonnet is what she would wear, because that was washable. Or a tattered old one. This is a bonnet it's silver reef they have that is the exact same time frame. And that is this is an original. I took these photos because they asked me to date this lovely hat. Again, who thought to preserve this beautiful hat? And its construction is it's kind of it's like cardstock. You know, manila file folder? It's thicker than that underneath it. Now, further on down the line, they'll have buckram and crinolines that are stiffer that can be made for, that they use for hats. But this is a very, very early example of a bonnet. So to form the structure, it is actually a form of cardboard. And that's a lovely example.
Were those two different hats?
No. No, that's the back of the hat. It has a little ruffle and a little sun block. That ruffle in the back would conceal your neck. And that's the side view. Beautiful silk bonnet. She would not have worn a silk bonnet because she's a worker. She's working the plantation, she's working the farm, she's working something. Or she's a maid. We just could never know. Now, corsets. Women wore corsets. And during this time, you can see that the shape of the corset is high, and there's no formed waist because this is high-waisted, and she doesn't need that. So the style doesn't support anything but this kind of corset right now. So it has evolved. The corset has evolved. The corset has been around since women were around. And it changed and evolved to where it was more comfortable during this frame with straps. And again, you can see the gathering here would enable her to release a breast for breastfeeding, or in some cases they even opened. Now this one is older. That's from the Pioneers Museum, one that I dated there for them. 1827, and you can see the eyelets in the back. They're not metal because we don't have metal eyelets either right now. So they were made of bone and shaped hand honed, and then worked into the corset so that they would so that it would support the back when the laces are tightened. But right now we're not talking about this corset is designed for support, but not tight lacing. It's not a real aesthetic corset. In the front, she would wear what's called a busk. This is a bone busk, and it would tuck right down the front. And if it would, usually it would be a lot longer. It would be down to here, so she's not bending. She still has to. She has to keep herself upright and rigid when she's bending over. They could be metal. This would be a lot sturdier, and then also wood. They would just put a piece of wood down there. And sometimes they were brilliantly hand carved in designs, intricate designs, and preserved over and over, and used corset to corset. But corsets changed a lot during that time frame. And after this time period, about the 1840s, then it turns into the waist is the great attractant in fashion. This is an example of, also the lines would be piped or corded. This one here is a corded corset. That one has a lot of cords in it as well, but they could also have whalebone in them on the sides. This is a whalebone umbrella. This is whalebone, and you can see that it flexes. Some flexibility. Most of these, this is way thicker than what you'd find in a corset. They would be very, very thin. But it is flexible, and it comes off like in sheets, all the layers of the bone. And the women would wear that up inside their corsets to stiffen them. I don't know if it's stained. I bought it off of eBay. They didn't know if it was stained either. So corsets. She's going to wear a corset. And these are examples of busks that could have, they were wider and, like I said, would go all the way down. And this is a busk, these are busk pieces from later when there was a pinned busk, pinned with a hook. And those are all from Silver Reef. They found them in their John from the outhouse when they extricated all of that from Silver Reef. So this is later in the 19th century, but I wanted to show the examples because I think that's just really cool that they found those. She would wear a chemise and drawers. Now, she has many tasks to do in her life. So what is she going to do when she has to go to the bathroom? That's a whole lot of stuff to be putting on. Well, for one thing, she would wear split drawers. These drawers all had a split in the middle. So that would make it convenient. That adds to convenience, but think about having to do this. And then, if she were inside and it was cold outside, she'd use this. One of these, or it would be, it would sit down inside of a wooden bench to make things more convenient. But I guess next time you do this, you can think about how convenient we have it versus having to do this. And I wanted to show, this is a corset from my collection. This is more of a 1890s corset, but you can see it has the front busk on it. That's the later version of a corset. This has been tattered and repaired as well. And you're welcome to look at all these things when we're done. So that is got to be quite an experience. Or the outhouse. You know, she's got a door on the outhouse. Maybe she hooked her sleeve on a ragged nail or a piece of wood going in the outhouse, or maybe in the barn when she was bending down to milk the cows or tend the chickens. Maybe that happened. It's just really, really lovely piece. So what was going on in the 1830s? I wanted to put this together because I think it's important to look at what was, the life was like. Of course, our population is all East Coast during this time frame. There's very few people other than Lewis and Clark coming out west. So Andrew Jackson is president. A big thing that happens now is the debates on slavery. The South is making buku bucks based upon slavery, and they're not giving it up. But there's been lots of rattlings right now. In the 1830s, people start rebelling. Women start rebelling against women who have a voice. And that's a very minor amount of women at the time. Women who had a voice or a public platform of any kind would speak out against it. This is a huge movement happening. But in 1836, they put a gag order on anti-slavery, meaning in Congress, Senate, whatever, you can't talk about it. That's it. We're done. That solidified the South for the next 20-some years, almost 30, until the Civil War happened, until Lincoln got in and changed things. Queen Victoria was crowned we're entering 1837 to 1901, was the period of Queen Victoria. A very long reign, and she was just a child, just a young woman when she was into monarchy. And then 1837, there was a depression, and we have a new president, Van Buren, and also in here is the Alamo, the Battle of the Alamo just south of us. What was happening in the church at the time? 1830, the church organized in Fayette. Their gathering to Ohio and Missouri begins, and expulsion from Missouri about 1838. And they started to head east to trying to find a place where they were not disturbed. This, I think, is an important key when we talk about who she was, because this dress came, either it came across or someone moved to this area with this dress, or it came with them. We just have no idea. But this is an important aspect, I believe. So women of the time, when I was talking about women's movement, women who had a platform, women that were had husbands that had voices, they would have a voice. And they started as abolitionists and reformers and activists. Many of them wrote papers, they spoke out, they did lectures. They started their movement to educate women. A lot of these ladies did. Very important time frame. There was also a spiritual revival. So all the churches, the Methodist Church, it was a non-denominational movement towards Christianity during this time, and then the church came about around the same time period. This is this is from her story, and this is which is a wonderful book. I brought my signed autographed copy by my friend Charlotte Wiseman, and it covers all the famous women through the centuries and what their accomplishments were. It's really a lovely book. And this is from that book, and this is where the textile industry was mainly women. And they were speaking out, they started speaking out against their harsh conditions. They had to work in, near slavery conditions for almost nothing. And the danger, remember now there's no organizations that go around and say, well, you can't do that because you're going to get harmed, or you shouldn't put your hand in that loom because it's going to get cut off. There's none of that. It's unsafe. They're worked to the brink. And so they actually had 1834, they had a women's rebellion. So they actually went on strike, so to speak, which was very, this is the first of its kind. Oh, I'm going backwards. Now, Sarah Josepha Hale. This is a huge women's movement that's beginning now. Now, Sarah Josepha Hale started a publication called Godey's Ladies Book. And that wasn't her only claim to fame. Godey's Ladies Book began a whole slew of ladies' magazines, just like this. This is a Peterson's, and this is full year 1864. So in here, in these books and in these words, this is our first attempt to try to organize and educate women everywhere. And I was laying in bed at 5 o'clock this morning thinking about how they conducted a mail order business during this time frame with no mail? You know, how did they distribute? How did you pay them? How did you write in, and what did you send in an envelope to them that they put you on a subscription list? All of these things are just really, that goes to the history of publishing, I guess. But Godey's Ladies was the beginning of the whole thing, and it included dresses, full color pictures of quilting examples, poetry, stories, all kinds of things, and etiquette, how you should behave in public and what you should and shouldn't do, and what you should wear and how you should wear it, and who did what when. Like in the society tables, they would have examples of what people did in the, at the balls or at these current events. But in these bindings came patterns made out of tissue paper. So every single issue had its own patterns. Tissue paper patterns, very fine tissue paper patterns that were printed. And this is what they looked like. This is an actual one. So they would come in 2 sheets like this. They might have embroidery patterns. But they have minimal instructions. So you had to have some knowledge of sewing, which women did, because women all made the samplers such as this here. They all made samplers and learned to stitch, and that's the example here for the museum. But if you look at here and you look closely, you can see that all of these lines have different patterns. So you would lay across your own tissue paper on top of it and draw around it, and that's how you'd get the pattern. And some had embroidery patterns. There was always 2 sheets. A few instructions on pieces, and it would all be referenced to the current issue that you were working with. And this is something that a lot of people don't know about because these didn't survive. This is a copy of an original that I happened to get a hold of. But they don't survive. And whoever has them, yes? It was originally hand-drawn. Yes, and then it was printed. Then they overlaid them onto a tissue paper and had to make an original and print it. Now your question is, who made the patterns? They came with the issue. Every issue, every one of these books, every month would have a pattern. And that holds true for Le Mode Illustré, Harper's Bazaar, Peterson's Women's Daily. They all had them. Who made the patterns? I have no idea. I would imagine they consulted the local to the publication, some women who were expert seamstresses and who did work for the wealthy. That's my guess. Just the same as they would consult editors and poets from the time frame. But Sarah Josepha Hale, when she started Godey's Ladies book, she was 38 years old, widower, and had 4 kids. She couldn't support them, so she figured it out. Not only did she start Godey's Ladies book and become just one of the premier voices for women in the United States. I need to read you what else she accomplished. She was responsible for Thanksgiving as a national holiday, She was an early champion of elementary education for girls equal to that of boys and of higher education for women. She was the first to advocate women as teachers in public schools. As the friend and advisor of Matthew Vassar, she helped organize Vassar College, the first school of collegiate rank for girls. She demanded for housekeeping the dignity of a profession and put the term domestic science into the language. She began the fight for the retention of property rights by married women. Again, women have no rights now. We all know that, right? We didn't get to vote until just a little while ago. She started the first day nursery, a boon to working mothers. She was the first to stress the necessity of physical training for her sex. She was the first to suggest public playgrounds. Among the earliest to recognize health and sanitation as civic problems, and the first to crusade for remedial measures. For many years was the president of the Seamen's Aid, establishing the first sailors' home. She sent out the first women medical missionaries. That was huge, too, in this movement time frame, medical missionaries, because they wouldn't accept a woman as a doctor or a nurse. You had to be with your husband if you went on a mission or went anywhere. You just couldn't go there if you're a single woman. She raised money that finished Bunker Hill Monument, rescued the movement to preserve Mount Vernon as a national memorial, the author of 24 books and hundreds of poems, including Mary Had a Little Lamb. She was the first woman editor in this country, and for more than 40 years presided over the destinies of Godey's Ladies book, the most widely circulated magazine of her time. And she signed herself the lady editor. And she was 38 years old when she started that. So that's why she's important, because that started educating women and spreading the word. Can you imagine now, how would she get a hold of Godey's Ladies book? She may have had someone have one and passed it down. They read it and they passed it down. Who knows? But she was probably sure to know about them. So
that looks like a book. If you look up at magazines are different.
yeah, this was.
Is that the
They were books. Some of them, the Harper's Bazaar later. Harper's Bazaar were long and wide like this, very big. Harper's Bazaar, Harper's Weekly, they all had very big pages. But the good deal of them were like that. And I imagine that was a shipping issue. It took up less weight and less space to have them not bound. Godey's, this here is Peterson, and it's a full year, so it's 12 months in here. Whereas the individual Godey's, now that I think about it, would have paper. I think only the full years were bound. But that would make sense from a weight perspective. You got a Pony Express carrying a whole bunch of women's magazines. You don't want to be carrying library books. So, after knowing all this, what do you think? Where did she come from? Anybody got any ideas? My theory, in case you wanted to know, I have always felt this. That is, I have no facts to support this. I think she came from Missouri. I think this was a dress that was an important woman in the Missouri movement, whoever that was. We have no idea. But I think it was important enough where they were starting to flee Missouri that they brought this dress, or she wore it during that trek over to Nauvoo. Don't know, but that's my guess. It's impossible to tell, but the only real aspect of this is that it's an extraordinary piece of Americana and womankind in itself. Women in America, what they lived through, what they went through, and how we got to today. She was either a tiny woman or it was preserved. She was a young woman. But what you see in a lot of preserved clothing from the 19th century, any century, is that when you're 13, 14, 15, before you're married and before you have children, you wear different clothing. And after you have your children, then clothing doesn't fit anymore, so that clothing was preserved. That would be the clothing. That's why you find so many small sizes in extant clothing when you go to museums. Yeah?
Is the hem typical? Or did they make it that the hem to raise the lower group?
All of the above. Yeah, it was typical in later years when, right now, this is not a stiff skirt. It is loose. So it could have been hemmed. It could have been hemmed for her. It could have belonged to someone else. But it also gives weight to the hem. So it has more stand. And in later fashions, then you'll see horsehair put in there so that it stands out, so it's very stiff.
I had a grandmother, great-great-grandmother, that had a dress that had a big hem like that. And when she died, they found $600.
Let's look. That's a great story. That's a great story. That's a great story. So that's what I have for you today. Do you have any questions? Any other questions?
I just wonder when they found all those bones and stuff and that was putting it one several ways that we're done with these. We're not wearing anymore.
No, that didn't happen. It just did not happen. It did not happen until about 1920. That's when they gave up corsetry. Now, why do you suppose women were wearing corsets? That is partially true. She said, because men thought they looked beautiful. Really, in this time frame, and remember, women are chattel. You're owned by your father, then you're sold to whoever buys you as a wife. Now, and I don't know how the church actually worked during this time frame, but you would create a dowry. You had to give the father a dowry to buy your daughter and get a name. They would trade money for names. So when you had a wife that looked beautiful in her corset and her beautiful clothing, because you could tell how wealthy they were. So if I'm standing here before you and I'm standing up straight and I can't do any work and I have this beautiful clothing on, you know that I'm valuable. I'm a valuable name in the world. I either had money or I had a title. And the rest of the people, the rest of the women were workers, and they strove. So there's a hierarchy ranking in society. Then, if you were a poor woman or a working woman and you wanted to try to look good, then you'd try to attract a man that was of a higher standard. So then when corsets became more readily available, they could wear corsets and they would look the part so that they could attract a man, even though they didn't have money or a title. It was all a very shell game, basically. And she, this woman, whoever wore this, she probably could have taken out that busk so she could bend and move and do her daily chores. that was common. Even in corsets like these, it was common to take out the front pieces so you could bend and move, especially in working women who ran the households. But if you had slaves, you would take the slaves and you would put them in all of the outdated clothing, and you would dress them, because you don't want slaves in your house looking like slaves. You want them to look like the rest of the family, and the wealth of the family resemble that. Mm-hmm.
Question about keeping something like, I have a beautiful wedding dress my mother made me, and my husband made me a cedar chest, and I thought I could just wrap it in a cloth and keep it in a cedar chest.
No.
There's a right and a wrong way
Yeah.
to put that away.
Yeah.
How do you tell us to keep it?
You know, there's museum quality boxes and tissue paper for that purpose. Yeah, and there is, depending on what it's made of, you get the correct tissue paper, and you wrap it, or you stuff it, you wrap it. She was stuffed and wrapped in a box, and that's how you preserve it. That said, I have a whole bunch of Eggston clothing, and it's hanging in my closet. Don't tell anybody that. I don't have the space to get boxes and tissue paper, so I keep it however I can. But if it's silk or something like that, it can certainly decay. Silk, depending what, it will go yellow. What period is it from?
Well, it's 50 years old.
Oh, that's not bad.
No.
Yeah, but to preserve it for centuries, you would want to take that care. Anyone else?
We want to thank Denise and thank you all for coming. This has been very informative, very fun, and we're always so happy to highlight one of our items here. And she will be back on display later today in her real home upstairs. But anyway, thank you very much, Denise, and thank you all for coming. Yes. Oh, how she ended up with us?
Yeah.
Okay, I became the museum director in 2009, and I didn't know very much about the museum at all. And I learned a lot of things about how to display things and how to take care of things by going to workshops. And then when Denise came and started talking to us about dating garments and how to take care of them and everything, we went through the entire museum. We found our uniforms. We found various things that she was very excited about. And simply as an afterthought, I said, you know, back in this closet is a gingham dress just hanging there. And it had been there. I saw it when I very first took over. Didn't think anything about it because it did not have a story. It didn't tell me anything about it. So I showed it to her, and I thought she was going to weep. She was so excited. She said, this is, without a doubt, the most priceless thing you have here in the museum. So my chore was find out how it got here and who it came from. I have searched all of the records. This museum was built in 1938, and that's when the Daughters of Utah Pioneers began to collect items. I cannot find out the date that it was given to us, or a name, or a family. But when the DUP, and I say DUP, membership went out to get artifacts that belonged to our early pioneer settlers, they just put a call out and said, if it belongs to one of the early settlers in Washington County, bring it. And they took it. So I don't know whether it came in 1938 or 1985, or all I can tell you is they didn't. Yeah, there's better record keeping now, but back when they started in 1938, quite frankly, they just took it and they put it places and they just put it on display. And that was it. It wasn't until much, much later that we started to give things a number so that we had a inventory control. It wasn't until 2007, we started taking photographs of the items and inventory them. So she was just a hidden treasure in the back of a closet. So that's one of the things that Denise always says, check everything when you're cleaning out Grandma's house. Check every corner and cupboard, and there's something probably very valuable there. But
and the most beautiful aspect is that it's at the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers Museum. I mean, this represents women.
Yes. The one thing we can be sure of is it belonged to a Washington County early pioneer settler. That's about the only thing we can truly say about it. But thank you, Denise. And please come upstairs and go through the rest of the museum. And thank you for coming.